have 2 girls presently. They're Chloe and Miley.
We struggled with infertility for about 6 years with the girls. Just no reason, no rhyme, no nothing. And then the doctors determined that I couldn't conceive naturally. It would, take a medical procedure to do that. And so we went through that process fairly easily, and the girls were born in 2009. This year came, and it was in April. His parents were there to visit, and I had to go for just a checkup.
She comes out from the doctor's appointment with a little bit of a strange look on her face, so I'm a little bit curious as far as everything okay, what's found out. And she hands me this test, and I'm like, what's this? She's like, it's what you think it is. And I'm like, no, you're going to have to explain it to me because I don't even know what I think it is. I have an idea, but I don't think that's possible. And she goes, no, it apparently is. We're pregnant. So I'll be honest with you. There was fear that went through me, anxiety that went through me. My question was, we won't be able to sit at a booth any longer. I mean, that's the first thing that goes through my head. I mean, what are we going to do?
So we got through that month, and we'd planned a trip home Memorial Day weekend. So we thought, well, that'll be the perfect time to share. It'll be far enough along in the pregnancy where we'll know it's a stable pregnancy. And so we go home to Kentucky, and the girls had a birthday party at the grandparents' house with probably 50 family members there. And we were going to share with them. And we shared with the girls that day at lunch before we went over to the parents' house. And we sat the girls down at the table thinking, they've prayed for a baby for 5 years. Constantly. And we thought they were going to be so ecstatic and just really, really thrilled. And they look at us and, are we still going to get our puppy? And they were just so disappointed that we were sharing with them that they might not, the possibility might be, gone, that they would get a puppy.
As we're filming it on our iPhone.
Yes, waiting for the big reaction with the iPhone so we could, of course, share, and there was no reaction.
No, are we getting a puppy?
Still getting our puppy. At 20 weeks pregnant, I had to go get an ultrasound because of my advanced maternal age, or elderly as they stamp on your chart. Just routine things to check for anatomy of the baby, and I wasn't surprised by that at all. I worked in labor and delivery for 10 years, so I thought, this is our chance to get to see the baby up close and personal. And we go in for our appointment, and the doctor does the ultrasound, and the tech that was doing the ultrasound explained a few parts of the anatomy and then explained that the doctor was going to come in and talk with us. I thought that was kind of out of the ordinary. So she left the room. He comes back and starts to show us, repeated again, the parts of the baby, the anatomy. Gets to the kidney part of the baby and says, there's really an area here I can't identify. I'm going to have to send you to another hospital to examine and just determine really what it is, because I can't even tell you what I'm seeing. And he was a maternal fetal specialist, so he had done this before. So, just shock again. And, the miracle of the pregnancy was enough in itself. But then, we're like, why? Why are we being faced with this? We didn't even expect to be able to have this child, and now we're going to go through this with this baby. And, Jared was leaving to go on a work trip immediately to the airport. So we walk in numbness to the car. He says goodbye, and away we go. And that was that day. So they start to schedule me for other appointments in Philadelphia to determine what the diagnosis was. So we had to wait for a full week while he was away. And we'd also received the news 2 weeks post-pregnancy that we were moving to Texas. So there we are with whole new medical procedures, moving the girls to start kindergarten in the fall, and he leaves on an airplane. So I just sit in my car and cried. I'm like, really, what is this about? What am I to learn from this? I immediately felt a sense in my spirit that this was a teaching time for me and a growing in my faith. And I just didn't understand exactly what was going to happen, but I did have confidence, and I knew that whatever it was, we could face it.
Yeah, I think it became very real to us for the first time because we got to hear the heartbeat and got to hear all those special things that you want to. And for me, I know up until that part, it was really hard to wrap my mind around. It was really hard to grasp that we were even pregnant. Because she wasn't showing. It was still, to me, it was pretty impossible. And until I heard the heartbeat, that's when it became real. And then to turn around and get other news, and then to just have to leave, that was one of the toughest days. One of the toughest days.
One of many that we would face after that. So they referred us to Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for the ultrasound and the MRI the following week. And so we made plans to do that amongst all the other life changes. We were very fortunate that we had some awesome friends to walk that journey with us who had been down those same steps. Because it was a very shaky time and an unstable time in our life, and we'd never been faced with anything like that with our children because the girls had always been healthy. So it was very much a gift for them to be there with us. We didn't know where we were going. We'd never been there before. So we go into the hospital that morning to have those tests run, and they take me into a room to do an ultrasound, which should have normally taken an hour maybe. It took 3 hours, and the ultrasound tech said that it was the most images they had ever taken of our child. And they pretty much walked us to a room with only one physician, and we were told we were going to be sitting down with multiple physicians to help us to understand what they could do for our child, that they could, do surgery, or there was a cure for whatever they were finding. And she sat us down in a chair in a room across the table and started the conversation with, "Your child's anatomy is bizarre." So she went into depth of all the diagnosis and the different parts of the baby's anatomy that had malformed according to what she could see with her eyes. And we just sat there.
It's just disbelief, because I kept waiting for good news. And because we'd been there 8-9 hours and test after test. And so she kept going through the list, naming off, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong, this is what's wrong. And after about 15 minutes or so of just constantly everything that's wrong, and I even asked, is there any good news to share? Anything?
That's exactly what
And, she quickly reminded me, well, she's not suffering right now, was the response that we received.
The prognosis was death. That's the only term she could use. She said it's so bizarre. There's no cure. There's no way to fix the problem. And even if the baby does survive pregnancy, the baby won't live beyond birth for many, many minutes at all. And the only option we were given from her was to terminate the pregnancy within a couple of days.
We couldn't understand why. Couldn't understand why this would be like this after, something that was impossible was made possible. Why would we now start to go through something like this? What were we being taught? What was
the point in giving us the child only to take it away?
Absolutely.
Really was the thought that went through my mind, because it was such a gift to our girls. They had so wanted a brother or sister, and I was so excited. And I thought, how do we tell our children? You start to really have to stand on your faith and live out what you've been teaching them for 5 years, to share with them heaven is real. And we may very well see your sister go to heaven now. And some really tough questions from them that we knew were coming that we didn't know if we had answers for. So we shared with them that their sister was very sick and that she may not get to come home and live with us. And that's when the hard questions came from the mouths of babes. Why would God make our baby sick? Why wouldn't God take her to heaven and heal her and send her back to us? Or can we all just go live in heaven with her now? So I think in that moment, that was when I decided too that we hadn't been standing on our faith. And if they had that kind of faith in who He is, that we needed to have that kind of faith too. We both just kind of looked at each other and said, you know what, we've completely given up.
we've completely put our God in a little tiny box, and we've just accepted what, medicine, what surgeons have told us. And from that moment on, we just looked at each other and said, you know what? We don't accept this. We're going to turn it over to God. And at that moment, I think our prayer was for the unexplainable. And we asked, and we completely turned it over, surrendered, and said, you know what, God? That's our prayer. We're praying for the unexplainable, and we want to be very specific about that because we don't want anybody to be able to take credit for it except you.
For me, it went down the path of Abraham and Sarah when Abraham totally just laid Isaac out to God and said, he's yours. And I'm like, God created her, and God knows exactly how he created her. This is not a mistake. And so for me, that's the mindset I had to go to. This is your child, God, and take her and do what you want with her. And I'm trusting you to heal her. And if you choose not, you'll give me the strength to get through that. And so from that day forward, we just drew a line in the sand and said, this is it. We have a big God who's possible of anything, who can do whatever he chooses to do with this child. And we just gave her to him and started asking for prayer from every direction we could get it. And then we got on an airplane and flew to Texas to really no appointments, no doctors. We didn't know anyone. So then we started the process of making doctor's appointments with just referrals from our realtor. That's really where I started. Mm-hmm. So I just made an appointment with a regular doctor just to share with her what was going on. Sit down in her office, and she had already read over all of my paperwork, said she thought she knew me on a personal basis already, and shared that she wanted to leave this in our hands. And I shared with her right away that we were living out faith, and we believed that God could heal our baby. So we wanted to do whatever he could. And so we made an appointment with a specialist once again. And I go into the doctor's appointment thinking they're going to see all this and, we're going to hear the same thing over again. But we sat down in the office that day, and he did the ultrasound, and he immediately was like sharing with me all the good things that was going on with our child. And I thought he was mistaken. And I'm like, but let me share my list with you of what this doctor has given us. And he goes, I don't see any of that. And I really don't need to see your list, because welcome to Texas. We believe in big things here, and God can do big miracles.
I remember coming in, and I remember, once again, just praying and praying all throughout the day and just hoping for the best, but still feeling and remembering all the news that we've gotten and expecting probably the worst or confirmation. And when she came home and told me that, hey, doctor wasn't seeing these things, and she kept going through the good things, and I kept asking, okay, but what else? What about this? What about this bad thing? Did they check for this? To me, that was humbling. I was overwhelmed.
It gave him a chance to share his faith at work in unbelievable ways, because in the corporate world, you don't get a chance to do that real often. But people all over his work praying and reaching out and asking what God was doing. So it was amazing to us to see how many people she was drawing to God during that process and that trial for us. As hard as it was for us, the good that he was doing through it with others. She would be a thriving little girl who's going to be a warrior for God. And we'd given her name, Harper Faith. And that's truly what it took to stand on, to see her be changed and be healed. We had to have faith that he was going to do that, and that he was who he says he is. He loves us all, and he has special good plans for all of us, and he was going to see that fulfilled through her. We learned our faith through our church family and through reading God's Word and spending time in prayer, and in the last 4 years at LCBC, totally building our wisdom of who God is and the relationship he wants to have with us. And that's truly what we had to stand on. God could have come to us and said, I'm going to give you a normal pregnancy, and everything would be wonderful and exciting, through this process, it drew me in so close to him, and a dependency I've never had before in my entire life. Even with conceiving my girls, just a different kind of faith, a different walk with him and trusting him, because I had to live in surrender, and I could have settled for, an easy path, and I wouldn't have known him in the degree that I know him today through this.
Knowing what has happened and knowing how much we've grown from it, and how many people who have, reached out to us and let us know, what they've taken away from it, how they've been blessed by it. For me, then that's Harper faith already having, an impact on the world through God. Because one of the things that's always been our big prayer is that, our girls will do God's work, and they'll be able to touch others in ways that we would never be able to, and they'll do greater works than things that we could ever possibly imagine. And to see that already happening with Harper is incredible. It's incredible to see people talk and just say what a blessing that she's been, and she hasn't even arrived yet. And so for me, that's something that's overwhelming. It's something that I don't necessarily say I would have signed up for, but knowing how God works and knowing that he has a greater plan, and his plan is so much better than anything that we could possibly put together, has been just mind-blowing to me.